Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the panel, and thank you for the invitation from Taipei Arts Museum. So I think, the key concept for this panel is called history. But really, I think for the whole biennial exhibition, the key word for the exhibition is about yearning. And I think an important connection between yearning and history is that history is not just about how we document the past, but it's really about how, the present moment, connected to the past, but also how we perceive it, in our daily life. So I think the first question I really want to ask our four artists is about how their installation really curate this idea of history. And particularly, I think all four of them, really draw from different historical contexts that involve, the questions around colonization, around political trauma, around different forms of traumatic experiences and erasure or displacement. So my first question would be for Zih-Yan, and particularly on how his work is related to the history, and particularly on Japanese colonization.
就是在我的作品就是在大町的那个飞机，那这件飞机的作品，它的名字叫伪飞行场。那它其实来自说我目前住的地方在云林北港，然后我其实这个计划大概是3-4年前就开始构想，那到了双年展的时候把它制作出来。那这其中其实比较有趣的是。台湾在日治时期的时候，尤其是2战末期，其实日军它广设了很多临时机场。所谓的临时机场，其实就是相较于像松山机场这种比较完整的设备，它其实就是只是2个跑道，然后有一些就是碉堡的设施这样。那在北港的地方，因为我每天的工作来回会经过就是农田嘛，那在农田中间就是出现了一个，我就发现了一个碉堡。那经过一些就是资料的就是收集啊，然后查证就发现它叫做耐爆通讯所，就是一个专门在通讯的飞机起降的一个碉堡。那从这个碉堡开始，我就感到很有兴趣，就是到底是为什么这个地方会有这个东西。那在北港这边的状况，它其实是它的跑道分为左右，那就是东边跟西边。那东边的跑道就是一般的飞机起降跑道，那比较有趣的是在西边的这个跑道，它是一个伪飞行场，那它的目的其实就是要欺骗敌军来轰炸。那它的做法呢，其实就是它在东边的跑道会把那时候的临时战斗机藏在，比如说树下或是就是草堆里面，然后西边的这个伪飞行场，他们请了就是北港那边的朝天宫，因为北港的朝天宫非常有名。那朝天宫附近很多的就是做庙宇的一些工艺师，然后他们日军找了那些的工艺的技师去，就是去制作了假的飞机。那些假的飞机的材料主要是以竹子啊，然后或是可能就是还有一些涂装啊，就是这些工艺师他们用他们的技术去制作这些假的飞机。那实际上在当地的口述也有真的就是被美军轰炸这样。那从这个地方我就开始去思考说，是不是像这种没有被载入证实的一个地方的历史，它是不是有可能让我们有更多对于就是过去历史的一个想象或者一个诠释的空间？对。
谢谢Zih-Yan的回答。那so I want to invite Hiraki Sawa-san to answer also on the historical context question, because his work also draws on, the Japanese colonization of Taiwan, but I think in a very, very different way. Especially, I think there is a desire for his work to kind of de-individualize, right, these stories. So would you talk about a little bit about your research process and also how you think about this particular historical context in your work?
你好, I'm Hiraki Sawa, the visual artist, a video artist, originally from London, originally from Japan, but based in London right now. And this time I made a new video installation work called Nowhere in Myriad Layers. And how I started making this work is the aiming to let the memory of future appearing. That's how I started with. That's the concept or idea. I just had it, but I didn't know how to do it. So at first, I started collecting all the individual memories in Taipei. Through the age group of these people I interviewed with were the people, the elders who were born during the Japanese period. So basically, they had a Japanese education. Then in 1945, when the war ended, they were forced to speak in Taiwanese or Mandarin. And also, I had in another interview in Japan, where I'm from, called Kanazawa or Jinza. And we had a massive earthquake last year in 1st of January. And then these people also had this time, how can I say? I'm not really good at explaining about my work really. But the people had the time when they were living daily, happily, but suddenly this earthquake happened. And next day, they lost the home, they lost the things, they lost the belongings and everything. And I found there's some kind of connection that they, no matter how they were, the time shifted one place to the other. In Taiwan, the war ends, not willing, these Taiwanese, of course, they wanted to end the war, but they were forced to be something else, as well as Japanese community. These are people who were living happily and all that thing. It's too long, maybe. And because I'm not, first of all, maybe I should really say, I cannot talk about history, really. That this subject, the topic we are talking now, is about history, but I thought, I cannot talk about history, but I thought I'm more interested in the memories. So it's not about history, it's about the memories. That's the difference. And the history is more like a communal, like a record of communal memories. And then about the memories, it's what I'm interested in was more like individual, intimate, can be really fragile experience they had in the past. So I corrected those because the way I work with generally my creative process is it need to be really intimate. I'm quite, tiny. I can't deal with something big. I need to be something really fragile. That's something I love. Mm-hmm. So I collected those and then put those together and then I'm trying to create this work or some experience that, as I said, letting the memory of future appears. Not just I'm not making the memory. I'm just letting it to appear. That's how I did it. For now, I think I'm stopped.
Thank you, Hiraki. And I want to go back to Zih-Yan for a little bit because both your work are, drawing on similar context, but in a very different form. But as both of you have said, right, you are really working on memories, but not history. And I also know we just talked about briefly, right? Zih-Yan also says, right, in his work, he intentionally choose not to use a lot of archive or document to represent this piece of history. So can you talk a little bit more about your choice for your work? And also how you think Taiwanese people generally, understand or feel about Japanese colonization.
在我的作品里面，就是刚刚主持人有提到说，我有刻意的，应该说在我过往的作品中也是这样，就是我其实会 可能会做很多的前置的计划，然后资料的收集、档案的阅读。那我在我的作品里面会比较刻意去，会去避免使用就是档案的呈现，直接档案的呈现。那其实对我来说，就是档案或是文件，或是说这些已经非常确定的资料，它本身对我来说会固化某种创作的意义跟状态的内容。那这种固化其实对我来说，就是它只是很明确的指涉，它指向某一个对象或某一个时代的背景。那我觉得在这个东西的处理里面，它其实会某程度限制我在重新诠释历史这件事情的一个开放性。那是对我来说，就是其实像在这次的作品里面，它其实有很多的手稿或是很多的资料。那我最后在这个创作里面，其实它并没有被使用，但我转化了另外一种方式，它比较像是隐喻的方式进到这个作品里。那我其实并没有完全就是预设说观众他一定都要能够阅读到，就例如说，小男孩的衣服它是红色的，就是他是跑在就是田间，然后或是说在操场放风筝，它是一个红色衣服。那里面的那个像是一个过去时代的那一个老人，他其实身上穿的衣服是白色的。那其实对我来说，这种状态就是当他们一起上飞机的时候，就像是那个日本的太阳旗一样，它其实某程度它唤醒那个老人，他过去在也许是皇民化运动下的一种成为日本人的精神，所以他就想要再重新起飞。但这件事情其实是不可能存在的。那我觉得我在对于过去的历史档案文件这些东西，我会试着透过转译或是隐喻象征的方式，再把它重新带回作品里。因为对我来说，这样它其实有更大的想象空间跟诠释的可能。
Yeah, thank you, Zih-Yan. And I think next we're going to turn to a different context with Omar Mismar's work. And his work also draws from a different context. It's on, the political context of Palestine. So would you talk a little bit about the historical context you're drawing from for this work?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Omar Mismar. I'm from Lebanon, and I'm presenting Still My Eyes Water, which is the installation of fake flowers that you see in the first gallery on the ground floor. And it was produced in collaboration with Yu Ying from Yinghua Art Flower, which is based here in Taipei. And the flowers in the bouquet are based on flower drawings from a book that was published in 1870 by a Swiss missionary by the name of Hannah Zeller. In the book, she draws 54 different plate drawings of, 54 different drawings of the various wildflowers of Palestine. I took these drawings as blueprints, and we fabricated the fake flowers after them. Despite the missionary intention and the colonial undertone of this book, I evoke it as a historical document that is activated today, in the present, particularly in the face of erasure amidst the genocide and the ecocide that is happening in Palestine. And the work holds in tension the land as a living site, abundant with all of these beautiful flowers, and the land as a commemorative site, a scorched terrain that, at the risk of existing only in drawings and in make-do replicas. It samples fragments from a land that is forbidden to many Palestinians, and it also foreshadows its own transformation into a memorial of soon-to-be extinct species. The fake flowers in the installation are reconstructions of real flowers that are expected to grow freely, but that are now catalogued, displaced, or vanishing. And in relationship to the idea of, to the question of showing history, I'm interested in what poet and critic John Littalack describes as the poetics of memory, in what is made of memory now in the present. the form, the medium, and the language by which memory is evoked and complicated. So for me, memory less of a neatly retrieved idea or a dusty document pulled out from a drawer and put on view, and perhaps less of a silent witness who is finally given a chance or a platform to speak, but memory, which is a relationship to history, as recomposing the actively present elements of a historical tragedy or disaster. What is made of it now? How is it recomposed and reshuffled in order to make sense of it in the current moment? What are the traces and the residues of history and the ways we subjectively mark and document history, and the gestures that we use to understand the structures around us and to fight for the causes?
Yeah, thank you, Omar. I think I really like what you said about, the poetic enactment of memories. That's kind of how we can look at history from the present. And we turn to Song Tieu's work, and I do think Song's work really, you really see the colonial root in a much more vivid way. So can you speak about the context you're drawing from for your work?
Maybe unlike all of you on this panel, I'm actually using archival recordings that I have been collecting over the years. But my presentation here in Taipei draws on basically one statistic from the Bank of Indochina profits that, of course, have been recorded by the French colonial government in Vietnam at the time to record essentially the profits they made in Indochina. So I'm very specifically drawing from that colonial history, and I'm looking into essentially the turn of, so basically Paul Doumer, who was the general governor of Indochina, changed the measurement units of many various local measurement systems from Vietnam to Laos to Cambodia into one metric system. It was essentially a decree in 1897. And what you see here in Taipei is essentially, on the one hand, the old ruler, which is in Vietnamese called Tieu Đô Đất, which is a land ruler that's equivalent to something like 47 centimeters. And on top of that ruler rests a 40 centimeter ruler, because that's essentially what Paul Doumer did. He shortened that initial ruler, that initial land ruler, by almost 15% to 40 centimeters, just because it was more convenient as a measurement, because 40 is easier to measure than 47. But of course, it was actually used to increase taxation on the same amount of land by shortening the ruler. And of course, to implement it into a metric system that then again could, feed into a system of global trade, of calculating land and making that, of course, a site for extraction. So I'm sort of showing, those histories alongside. On the one hand, that process of erasure of a ruler that essentially isn't used anymore, or is really actually really forgotten. And then I'm using something that, of course, is still contemporary today, which is the metric system that we're using. So I'm comparing sort of different histories based on archival information that I've been collecting. But the archives are different. So on the one hand, you have the French recordings by the government, and then it's juxtaposed by a letter of a local inhabitant, which also the French kept, because this local inhabitant sent that letter to the French colonial government to ask for the return of his wife, which is actually based on a miscommunication where he's trying to explain that the vessels the French assumed were used to extract alcohol, because there was an alcohol monopoly that was implemented by the French as well, were actually not used to extract alcohol, but are just vessels, for decorating, for using as a water vessel, etc. And he's basically asking the French government to return his wife from captivity. So I think there's, different layers of history that I'm addressing. But of course, I'm also interested in what it means today, and maybe I can talk about that in the next round.
Yeah, I think it is so interesting that you're using the archives, because I think in the context of Taiwan, the Taiwanese audience would know, due to Japanese colonization, our land measurement, ping, that's also from Japan, and you really don't see that anywhere else, right? So that's a kind of very, I think, vivid enactment of colonization also in the Taiwan context. And I think my next round of questions will be more on the mediums that the artists choose to represent memories. And because we know in the ways we choose to represent memories or history, they're never neutral, right? And I think all four artists, they choose very specific kinds of objects and mediums to create their work. For instance, Zih-Yan is using these large size paper planes, right? And also the artificial flowers on videos and on rulers and gas tanks, etc. So I think for this question, can you talk a little bit more about how you choose a medium, right? How do you think that kind of dictates how we remember memories or histories now, and who gets to remember these histories? And we'll start from Zih-Yan as well.
就是在我的作品里面，我使用的材料就是瓦楞纸，还有就是一些就是再造的结构这样，然后瓦楞纸是包在飞机外面。那其实我的目的其实就是要让它看起来就是一个假的飞机，即便它的外形很接近真实的尺寸。那对于假的这个概念，其实就是我刚刚前面提到，就是来自伪飞行厂的，当时他们这批工艺师他们制作的假飞机。那我觉得在这个影片的拍摄里面，这架飞机它同时作为一个现场的雕塑，那它同时也是一个影片里面拍摄的道具。那其实我的这个想法其实来自于说，这一批工艺师他们其实用自己的技艺，就是用自己的技术，他们去参与了这个二战。虽然他们并没有实际的真的到了战场上面，但是他们本来是服务于宗教，然后最后他们就是在二战的末期，他制作这个假飞机。那我觉得有趣的是说，在这个对他们来说，在这个不可能飞起来的飞机里面，他们其实就是带入了自己的某种意识去参与这个二战的末期。那在这个整个影片的拍摄，我们可以看到，就是这架飞机其实都是一个停着的状态，它只是透过后面的一个荧幕的一个投影，然后用一些烟雾啊或是风去让它看起来是真的像在飞。那在最后呢，这个飞机因为它是纸做的，所以它最后是在一个田间被烧毁。那其实因为我刚提到说，就是这个作品本身它其实扣接着北港朝天宫这个庙宇的一个文化，所以在这个作品里面，最后的这个烧毁，然后还有加上很多北管的音乐，就是庙宇的，例如说唢呐、鼓啊，这一些的零星的音乐，其实都是在指向着这一批工艺师他们当时的一个历史。那烧毁的这个动作，其实本身它也有像是一种我们台湾的宗教里面像烧王船的一种概念。所以这整个作品的拍摄，它其实就是从来都不是指向一个真实的物件啊，它比较像是一种集体的一个地方集体的一个记忆或经验这样。
那最后因为就是先爆雷一下，对，最后有那个小朋友去飞风筝的一幕画面，那你可以提一下为什么会选择用这样子的一个画面，跟这个纸飞机做连接？
应该说这个作品我刚刚提到，大概是3-4年前的时候开始，就是去思考它到底是什么，因为这段时间花了一些时间去理清说为什么要做这个题目，然后为什么它跟我的关系是什么。那我当初最早的时候想到的那个作品的方式，就是 办了一个类似像风筝节，可是我其实办的地点就是在那个农田上的旧跑道，那其实看不出来了，就是办一个风筝节，然后邀请很多的当代的就是家庭啊、小孩、大人来放风筝，可是这些风筝都是一些战斗机的影子，然后因为我会觉得说，这些我们曾经发生在这一个地区或者这一个田的道路上面的一个过去的记忆，它如果只是一种重建，就是说再现这件事情，我觉得，它并不是我想要做的。那我觉得透过风筝或是影子这种很虚实的诠释，它似乎更能够带我们去思考说，我们现在在这个地方，那它过去是什么？那我们现在是什么？这样。
I think something really interesting about Zih-Yan's work, also related to Omar's work, is right the use of fake plants, right, or the use of fake flowers. And we've talked a little bit about the meanings of artificiality in your work. And could you say more about how do you see the power of this artificial flower and the meanings of artificiality in your work?
First, if I may, just a few words on this part of the question that talks about the tension between recording, preserving, and the tools we use to remember, which are never neutral. And I think that this quest or claim for neutrality is a false one for me, because to represent is to transform. It is to frame and crop, and by default to omit. Yet we see this neutrality or objectivity is often hijacked by state or official discourses and histories, precisely because it constructs an illusion of a simple, clean, verifiable voice of truth. And we know that history is never that, and it is never neutral. So I think that the mediums that each one of us is using here kind of defies this kind of unison that is often a construct. And I've been interested in fake flowers for a long time. I've been very attracted to them and very repelled by them at the same time. I think there's something about effort that it takes to make them look so real and so close to the real thing, yet they are dead. They many people have them because, you avoid the hassle of watering them and of keeping them alive. But at the same time, they collect dust and they are relegated to the background. They become part of a background decor. Most often, you tend to forget about them. So there's something about that material and that medium that felt quite exciting for me. And when the opportunity came to participate and be part of this biennial, I thought where better to kind of take this project further than where this industry has been, booming for the past, several tens of years. So in that sense, in contrast to you, perhaps, I want this impression or this first impression for the viewer to feel that it is a natural bouquet, that it is something that is drawing you in, but then I like also this idea that to be able to tell whether it's real or fake, you usually touch it, but we're in an art context and a museum, and you are not allowed to touch. So, but then the wall text kind of give it away. But anyway, this idea of occupying the mundane or familiar forms with particular memories, with imported memories perhaps, but not disconnected memories. Many of the flowers that we see might exist in different countries, but I think that my hope is that if you look closely and see these flowers and associate them with this work, then perhaps the memory of that flower and of Palestine will inhabit all the flowers that you will see in the future somehow.
Yeah, I really love what Omar says about how the artificiality or the fakeness, it's dead, but it also never dies, right? So there's an interesting tension between history and memory as well, that we think the history is already far gone, but it's also in the present so much. So there's a really nice connection there. And I think next, I actually want to ask Son about this question, because Omar does mention about how the choice of his work and his medium is trying to kind of defy the kind of state discourse of memories or remembrance. So how do you see your work represented in that way, and how do you, really conceptualize the object that you choose?
So basically for my work, in terms of those recordings about the prophets from the Bank of Indochina, these are actually the only recordings that exist from the time, because of course the French, had the money and resources to keep those records and to even make those records, right? So in that way, I do understand that my work, particularly by using it, is showing a one-sided part of history. But at the same time, the way I tried to solve that problem was to have essentially this 47 centimeter equivalent ruler, which is, the initial ruler that I was interested in, on the bottom. And what interests me most about the work is the way it functions, is that you always have the same amount of rulers on the bottom and on the top. And I'm mostly interested actually in the gap between those two rulers. So the emptiness, on the right, for example, in this image, that's where the violence lies. It lies essentially in the fact that it isn't there. Or the gap that I'm trying to show is actually what interests me most in this work, is what is erased, or what we don't even know sort of has been erased. And those methods of standardization return essentially in the floor piece that's titled Anti-Trauma Walk, because here I'm referring to a 40 by 40 centimeter rubber mat, which in Germany somehow, when I bought them, they were called anti-trauma mats, just because you wouldn't hurt yourself in case you would fall on a playground on such rubber mats. But I was interested in the circulation, of course, of rubber in Vietnam, because rubber is not, original, quote unquote, to Vietnam. It was imported. I mean, it was basically also a Swiss scientist, Alexander Yersa, who studied, rubber plants and the conditions under which those plants could grow in Vietnam. And he basically imported them from Latin America to then grow rubber in Vietnam. And so the way I tried to translate that work was to, reuse those rubber mats, and I sort of engraved holes in them to place those Indo-Chinese coins, because, for me, it's really about walking on those mats, and to really also walk on that history of extraction that even enables, us to use rubber. I mean, what Michelin did in Vietnam was they needed to invent all those tools, for profit, from the wheels to anything that we use with rubber that didn't exist before, and they saw it as a resource. But through that resource, of course, it meant that you needed to invent all those products for use later on that, we're using every day.
Can you talk a little bit more about the gas tank? Particularly, it says that there's one gas tank is filled with medicine. Why this choice? Yeah.
Well, we wanted to fill it with something else. That would be illegal to do here. Okay. So we opted for an obscure word like medicine. But essentially, the way those gasoline containers work is that it's, they all look the same, obviously, but one carries something different than the others. And that refers back to the latter, because the French colonial rule also implemented an alcohol monopoly, because they wanted to profit from the rice wine, use and consumption in Vietnam. So what they did is they built their own factories to make really bad tasting rice wine that they then forced, the locals to buy and drink. And what happened was, of course, through that, a big informal structure of extracting rice wine occurred. So people were hiding in all kinds of vessels under their bags. Women were pretending they were pregnant, and they had vessels, hiding under their stomachs or under their clothes. essentially to hide the alcohol, or they would hide it in something like gasoline containers. They were building a whole network of how to extract rice wine under the earth. So that work kind of indirectly tries to say something and not say something about what is in these vessels.
Thank you, San. And I think Hiroki's work, I think, represents something quite different, because I feel like your work has this compulsion in some way to want to departicularize individual histories, right? That the work is trying to embody a sense of kind of general sentiment that it feels like everyone can relate to. Can you talk more about how you think about your choice, your artistic choice?
First of all, I want to be artist or painter, or more to say painter. I want to be painter. So choosing those medium for me is like videos or the object, public space, installations, and also even like memories. That this time I collected memories. That's like my medium, as well as the space in the galleries and all that things. All for me, it's all it's all mediums, and because I want, and then for me, creating those space installations, that's like a painting. And to do that, why I'm doing that, the reason I'm doing that is I'm trying to, I don't know, it's not something that I prepared for this talk. Like the people, the Zih-Yan, the painter, I like his work. And then the reason why people like that, audience like his Zih-Yan painting, is because that's something you can paint. It's really easy. No, I wouldn't say easy, but it's really accessible. Once people see first those Zih-Yan painting, that's people think that's something, this is something really, I can do it. It's really accessible as an audience, as a viewer. And then but what's great about his painting is because that's once you go back to your house and then try to paint like him, you can't. That's because he has been trained, not trained, but he's really careful, serious about painting. And I want to be like him. Or maybe not, somebody else, but I want to be painter. So for the reason I choose those is because, like anyone can paint, anyone. So using those medium is, it's like try to make it as accessible as possible for audience as well as me too. And then it becomes, eventually it becomes part of my body as well. So me as artist or paint, not quite yet, but as a part of medium is to it's yeah.
So yeah, I think we talked about something on how you think about time, right? Because you talked about how you don't want the memories for the future. You want people to see that now. Can you talk more about how you look at temporality in your work?
When I was producing this work, my intention was letting, as I said at the beginning, letting the memory of future appears, not creating it, but appears. I was kind of started thinking this memory which I was shared from those elders, or that could be mine as well as anyone's, any people who comes to see my work, or not only my work, but the other all artwork in this space, in the museum, could be anyone's. And that then that's really this moment, you're sharing that moment with us, with artists, or with this, anyone, will change the future. That is my intention. Maybe that's it. So my future has been affected since I have this memory being shared by elders in this Taipei as well as the others. And then that happens every day. When I meet you, my future will change as well as, meeting anyone. It's, that's what our life really is, how it works.
So I'll take it as sort of a interconnected or interrelated of temporality, right, from past, future, but also through your work, the openness really help everyone to reflect on their own thoughts and memories, right? So it's not specific to a particular trauma, right, or piece of history or disaster, but it can be opened.
It's really open.
So we have some time, and then we have already a lot of questions from the audience. So I will try to frame them in a way I think that the questions can be related. So we have a lot of questions about history, obviously, because the panel is called History. So one audience asked, when you bring history into your work, when do you feel the weight of that history? Is the weight, a motivation that make you feel passionate about the work, or does it become a pressure? So that's one question. And the second one, I think it's about when you bring your work, and particularly it's a sculpture work, how do you, I think, create or a dialogue between the memory's fragility, but also its criticality. So I think the tension, right, between is the weight a stress or passion, right? And is memory a form of fragility, or does it make you have a more critical dialogue?
I think that it really depends. For me, it depends on when the work is being made. And, the past 2 years have been intense on all levels. There's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of needing to obsessively document and go back to archives because of the erasure that we have been witnessing unfolding on our phone screens. So in that sense, there is almost like an anxiety towards trying to cling into knowledge that we have, that we fear we might be losing. But despite that, and despite the somberness of this subject matter, I am quite interested in engaging with history in an irreverent and playful manner. I think of it as as a parent that you love and that you respect, but that also you might be fed up from, and that they give you lots of love, and for now you need your space. So there is this kind of relationship of appreciativeness and gratefulness, but at the same time the possibility again to recompose it into a meaningful thing that can create new meaning in the present moment. So in a sense, there's definitely the burden and the weight, but there is also the freedom and the possibility to work with it outside the structures that that we see, or that we encounter, or that academics encounter, or historians encounter in their kind of more structured disciplines. I think as artists we have this beautiful dynamic to existing knowledge that is that can be irreverent and playful, but also quite serious.
I think for me, I'm looking more into like the systems of administration and bureaucracy that is involved in something like a French colonial project. So for me, I think I'm more interested in looking at it critically. What I really appreciate about Omar's piece is that it's, hopeful in a way, no? I mean, you're kind of reactivating the archive or the things that have been recorded, and you're reconstructing that also, as a new form of turning the flower alive again, no? And I think for me, or within my work, it's a return to history and looking at something that isn't there anymore on the one hand, but it's looking at the difficulties actually of that problem of recording. So I'm looking on the other side of that history and the problem with the recording itself and the issues of things that have not been recorded. So it's a negative. It comes from a space of a negative that I'm trying to show. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
我觉得就是这应该就是作为一个艺术家或艺术创作的魅力，就是说我们对于历史这个题材，我们并不是一个历史学者，我们也并不是一个人类学家，我们是作为艺术家，所以我们其实更有创造力去在这个历史的这个过去的一些时间里面或是材料里面去自由的去处理我们想要处理的问题。那我觉得历史这题材对于我而言，它比较像是解决我自身的面对台湾的历史的一些疑问，就说日治时期跟我的关系到底是什么？我为什么要今天来处理它？那对我来说，就是这一些都是我作为我自身就是回应这个题材本身的一个方法。那我也觉得这个过程其实它其实是一个很享受的过程。
I have learned those history in Taiwan as well as Japan because I grew up here, I mean, these regions. And I do have that, but, and then I do appreciate that as well. But for my creation, my making, like an art making process, I would, yeah, I mean, basically what's the word? Sun or the Omar or Zih-Yan, it's looking at same direction, but the weight, because I do, I mean, everyone's saying, I mean, not, yeah, everyone's saying that's, yeah, the fragility of the history as well as I wouldn't say the weakness of the memory, because there's no great, you cannot compare the history or the memories, which is greater and which is stronger. It's both real. I think that's what that is. I want to pick up those small memories, and then just as an artist, I just want to filter those memories and express it on my own way, which I think all artists does. I think so. Yeah, that's what that is, I think. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. We have another question. I think this is probably something that I imagine artists would not like to answer, but I'll ask anyway. This is from the audience. Someone says that in politics of how histories are framed and linked to current reality versus the contested history, how do you see your work here and how to influence policy or political debates? I mean, this is a question that as an academic that usually has to answer, but I don't know how artists will feel like about your work related to the current political debates in any way. And just one additional question for Zih-Yan is about that your piece is separated, one in the right side and one in the left side. So how do you think about the spatiality in the way you curate your work?
我先回答第二个好了。对，就是我的作品它我觉得大厅是一个很难处理的空间，就是当一开始我知道我的作品必须被放在就是大厅的时候，因为在过去我在处理作品的空间都相对单纯，然后大厅它就会非常的复杂。它第一个，它在北美馆这个空间，它是三面是落地窗，然后它又会有很就是不时会有很大的飞机的那个共鸣声从上面穿越，然后它又是一个售票口，就是说它会人潮的进出，跟我们一般在看展的空间是相对复杂的。那我觉得这里面有很多难以处理的部分，然后也很多具有挑战的部分。那我觉得 作品氛围左右，或是说像地上有一些碉堡的椅子，然后或是飞机的本体在右侧这样。那其实它其实这2件作品，如果大家有机会上去这个体验的话，它其实是透过一种震动跟一种回音的方式去把这2件作品串在一起。那个椅子其实本身是会震动的，就是它的震动是配合着画面里面的影片里面的飞机的启动引擎，还有一些鞭炮声乐器。那飞机上面的也会有一个震动，那这个震动也是配合着右边的 LED 的萤幕跟它自身的就是这个飞机上的萤幕。我是希望在那边创造一种就是具有体感性的连接，就是因为那边在大厅这个空间本身就是相对比较复杂难处理。那我觉得一种体感似乎会比视觉或者是声音来得更容易被人记住，因为当人多，其实你也许影片你就没办法看得那么完整，或者说当人多的时候，声音就没那么明显。对，这是我的处理的一个策略，这样。
How do you think your work can answer the current political debates or any policy influences?
It can't. I think that there is almost like a built-in no in this question, like maybe the question needs to be reframed, but I think and I'll try to reframe it or reframe an answer around it. I think what it can do is alter our relationship to existing political debates, alter our relationship and the way we connect to particular topics and the way we connect to each other. And through this alteration, which happens by encountering the work, by being moved by it, by being frustrated by it, by having it haunt you, maybe through these, intentional and unintentional tactics when you encounter the work, the hope is something will change. And of course, it's not going to be the political debates on a level that we do not engage with directly. We are not policymakers or we are not, lobbyists in that sense. But I think my space, the space that I operate with, works on a different sheds light on a different side that might in the future can make a difference or change the way again we connect.
Yeah, I think ultimately the works are about altering, right, a sense of how we experience reality, and hopefully that can get to a different level of understanding. And so we're perfect at time, so please give our panelists a round of applause.
那就再次谢谢我们主持人还有4位与谈人。